People think crying easily is a sign of weakness. Psychology disagrees completely. Some of the most emotionally intelligent, deeply aware people on this planet cry more than everyone else. So why do we shame them for it? That answer will surprise you. We live in a culture that celebrates keeping it together. Control your emotions, stay composed, don't let them see you sweat, and definitely don't let them see you cry. But here's what psychology has quietly uncovered. People who cry easily are often not weaker than everyone else. They're wired differently. They process emotion more deeply. They feel more, sense more, and carry more. And science is starting to explain exactly why. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the hidden psychology of people who cry easily. What drives it, what it reveals, and why most of us have been misreading it our entire lives. Think about the first time someone told you to stop crying. You probably weren't an adult. You were a child. Maybe you scraped your knee. Maybe someone said something cruel on the playground. Maybe you just felt something deeply and didn't know how to hold it in. And the response you got from a parent, a teacher, a peer, was some version of, "Stop, be strong, don't cry." That message didn't just fade away, it got wired in. From a very early age, most people in this country learn that emotional expression is a liability. Boys especially hear it loud and clear. Boys don't cry, but girls aren't immune either. The lesson is the same regardless of gender. Emotions are inconvenient. Visible emotions are weakness. Tears in particular are something to be ashamed of. So what happens to the kids who couldn't stop? The ones who felt things so intensely that tears came whether they wanted them or not. They learned to hide it, or they spent their lives being labeled too sensitive, too emotional, too much. But here's the psychological truth that gets buried underneath all of that conditioning. Sensitivity is not a character flaw. It's a trait, a measurable, documented difference in how certain nervous systems process the world. Psychologist Dr. Relaine Aron coined the term highly sensitive person, HSP, to describe individuals whose brains are genuinely wired to process sensory and emotional information more deeply than average. Research estimates this applies to roughly 15 to 20% of the population. They don't cry easily because they're fragile. They cry easily because they feel deeply. And that's only the surface of what's happening inside them. Here's something most people never consider. Not all brains respond to emotion the same way. For the average person, watching a touching commercial, hearing a sad song, or seeing a stranger in pain registers, but it doesn't overwhelm. The emotional signal comes in, gets processed, and fades relatively quickly. For someone with high emotional sensitivity, that same signal hits differently, harder, longer, more completely. Neuroiming research has shown that highly sensitive individuals demonstrate stronger activation in brain regions linked to awareness, empathy, and emotional processing, particularly the insula and the mirror neuron system. Their brains aren't broken, they're just more responsive. This is why a person who cries easily might tear up at a movie scene that leaves everyone else completely unmoved. Why a piece of music can physically stop them mid-stride. Why a small act of unexpected kindness, a stranger holding a door, a friend remembering a detail you mentioned months ago, can bring tears to their eyes in seconds. It's not performance. It's not manipulation. It's their nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do, picking up on emotional frequency at a level most people simply don't operate on. And because of that, they often notice things others completely miss. The slight tension in someone's voice, the forced smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the moment a room shifts in energy before anyone else feels it. They read emotional subtext the way others read words on a page automatically, involuntarily, constantly. So when they cry, they're not losing control. They're responding to something real that most people in the room haven't even registered yet. There's a specific kind of emotional experience that most people who cry easily know intimately, and it has nothing to do with their own pain. It's the moment they watch someone else suffer and feel it as if it's happening to them. Not metaphorically, physically. A tightness in the chest, a lump in the throat, eyes that fill before they've made any conscious decision to feel anything. Psychologists call this empathic resonance. It's the neurological process by which we don't just understand another person's emotional state, we mirror it internally. And in highly empathic individuals, that mirroring runs deep. Seeing a stranger cry in public, watching a news story about loss, sitting across from a friend who's trying to hold it together. For someone with high emotional sensitivity, these aren't abstract situations. They're experiences that land inside them fully and immediately. And it creates something quietly exhausting that almost nobody talks about. They're not just managing their own emotional life, they're absorbing pieces of everyone else's too. This is why emotionally sensitive people often feel drained after social situations that others find energizing. They weren't just present in the room, they were tuned in to every undercurrent of emotion flowing through it. Their tears in these moments aren't self-pity, they aren't weakness. They're a direct response to someone else's reality, a signal that they were paying attention at a level most people never reach. But that kind of empathy, it comes at a price. Most people feel something, process it, and move forward. The emotion rises, peaks, and dissipates. Maybe within hours, maybe within a day. For people who cry easily, that's rarely how it works. They go home and replay the conversation. They lie awake thinking about the look on someone's face. They revisit a moment from 3 years ago and feel a version of the original emotion wash over them all over again. Not because they're being dramatic, but because their minds haven't fully let it go. This is called emotional rumination. And in highly sensitive people, it's not a choice. It's almost a reflex. What's misunderstood about this is the assumption that they feel more emotions than other people. That's not quite right. What's closer to the truth is that they feel emotions for longer. The signal lingers. The processing runs deeper, and because of that, they often arrive at insights about situations and people that others who moved on more quickly never reach. There's a reason many of history's most profound thinkers, artists, and writers described themselves as deeply sensitive people. The same trait that made them cry at things others shrugged off also made them see further into human experience than most people cared to look. Emotional depth is not comfortable. It is, however, generative. The person who carries emotional weight longer isn't failing to cope. They're doing something more demanding than coping. They're integrating. They're making meaning out of pain. But even with all of that going on inside, the body still needs a release. And that's where something unexpected enters the picture. For a long time, crying was written off by science as purely social, a learned signal to communicate distress. Recent neuroscience tells a more interesting story. Emotional tears, not the tears your eyes produce to stay lubricated, but the ones connected to feeling, contain measurably different chemical compositions. They carry elevated levels of stress hormones, including cortisol and adrenocorticotropic hormone. In other words, crying may be one of the ways the body physically expels the biochemical residue of emotional stress. After a genuine cry, many people report a distinct shift, a sense of release, of pressure lifted, of something settling that had been wound tight. That's not coincidence. That may be the nervous system completing a cycle it needed to finish. For people who cry easily, this process is more frequent and potentially more necessary. Their systems accumulate emotional load faster. The release valve gets triggered more often, not as a sign of instability, but as a form of maintenance. Think of it this way. A pressure cooker with a properly functioning release valve is safer than one that's been sealed shut. The person who cries when they need to isn't breaking down, they're regulating. Tears are not always signs of falling apart. Sometimes they're signs that the mind is actively working to restore itself. And when you understand that, when you see tears not as failure but as function, the whole picture of what it means to cry easily begins to shift. Here's the part that gets almost no airtime in the cultural conversation about emotional people. They are often exceptional at the things that matter most in human relationships. People who cry easily tend to be among the most compassionate individuals in any room. They don't have to work to care. They already do, deeply, consistently, often at their own expense. They're typically better listeners, not because they've trained themselves to be, but because they're genuinely present to what another person is experiencing. They pick up on what isn't being said. They notice the emotional truth beneath the surface conversation. They tend to have higher levels of emotional self-awareness. They know what they're feeling, and they've often spent years learning how to articulate it because they had to just to manage their own inner world. And they possess something increasingly rare, a real, unguarded connection to human experience. They haven't numbed out. They haven't armored over. They're still permeable to the full range of what life feels like, the beauty, the grief, the unexpected tenderness of ordinary moments. That isn't weakness wearing the wrong label. That is a form of emotional courage most people quietly wish they had. So here's the question worth sitting with. What if the strongest person in the room isn't the one who never flinches, the one who keeps a stone face through everything, who's mastered the performance of being unmoved? What if the strongest person in the room is the one who still allows themselves to feel it, who hasn't traded their sensitivity for social approval? What if feeling deeply isn't the opposite of strength? What if it is the strength? People who cry easily have been misread for most of their lives, labeled as fragile, told to toughen up, made to feel like something fundamental about them needs fixing. But psychology tells a different story. Crying easily often means you feel deeply. It means your empathy is real and activated. It means your emotional awareness runs at a higher resolution than most people operate on. It means you are still, despite everything this world does to discourage it, genuinely connected to the full weight and beauty of human experience. That's not something to hide. That's something to understand. If this video changed the way you see emotional people, even just a little, subscribe for more psychology insights that reveal what most of us never stop to notice. And drop a comment. Do you think crying easily is weakness or hidden strength?